officially welcome you all to the Figma Community Meetup 4.2.
So thank you very much for coming. And the talk जो आज देनी है, इसका नाम तो हमने यही रखा है कि it's designing outside the screen. Basically, real quick premise, building on तलहा जो आपकी सारी बात थी, accessibility, and आपने भी एक बड़ा ज़बरदस्त, I don't know who it was talking about it. So I'll take a pause before even my own talk. I think the key thing is we always talk about usability and user interface design, and then we try to separate the two. They're just inseparable, right? So accessibility is usability, and good design is usable by nature. You can't say कि ये usable मैंने एक लकीर डाल दी. The usability की मैं इसलिए, so how I segue into this, what I do, a little background कि मैं actually I'm an electrical engineer, and my background has been in tech. I worked in tech companies, worked with a lot of startups in Pakistan, worked with the precursors to Figma, Sketch, and Photoshop for the really old guys जब slices करते थे उनके. So you know I'm from that era. So the reason why this Figma talk will be interesting is because I do a lot of work now that is real world print or media design. Actually, so Nida, who made this? Who made this? ये जो code. So Ali, where's Ali? Ali, आपने बनाया था? So I'm assuming कि आपने Figma में ही बनवाया था इसको, right? So I mean, this is just an example of things that you get done in Figma. But why am I bringing this up? Because ये एक large size पे आपको print करना पड़ा था. You had to make sure the resolution was right. So I'm sure a lot of you have some graphic design background जहाँ आपके pixels वगैरह फट रहे होते हैं. You know, you haven't thought through it. Has anyone ever worked at an agency before जहाँ basically आपको कभी billboard बनाना पड़ा हो? Right? तो billboards वगैरह के लिए एक तो आपकी imagery सही size की हो, फिर आपका printing अच्छी हो basically. So and those files are huge. So it's interesting for me to see कि आप physical world के लिए Figma के through किस तरह design कर सकते हैं. The whole talk is not about just that, but I want to share some examples of things that I did. Actually, starting right here at Daftar Khan, because they were a client of mine last year, and शुरू हम कर लेते हैं wayfinding से. So wayfinding is the ultimate usability and accessibility for spaces. अगर आप देखो, आप अंदर आओ, आपको नहीं पता कि किधर है event unless कोई stand ही लगाओ. और अगर आपने जाना भी है, so basically, so for and another thing about accessibility is when you come in, who was the person that was making the comment about कि हम separate कर लेते हैं? There was somebody over here that was mentioned. Can you raise your hand? जी. So you said a very important thing about design. कि we can't really separate the two. Why do you want to like put on a different dark mode versus like accessible mode versus non-accessible mode, right? As an example, the person just walked out the door. So आप ऊपर आए. Since I worked on this space a lot with Saad and Ahmed as well, Daftar Khan project space थी, accessibility is a big deal. My dad's an architect, so I've grown up around architecture. और हमें, because हम सिर्फ screen के पीछे बैठे होते हैं, we're fortunate enough to work with things that are two-dimensional in nature pretty much. You don't really have to wonder about if somebody had to come on a wheelchair, उनका भी हक है ऊपर आने का. वो नहीं आ सकते, आ भी जाएं, for example, how are they going to open that door? You know, the stairs are right behind it. So वो एक design accessibility का failure from the architectural perspective, right? So our job is to build that kind of thinking into whatever we're doing for the screen, and then also outside the screen. And I'll just take a pause here because the talk here today also has a lot of physical samples that I've designed and made. सामने मैंने nerds की तरह किताबें भर के रख दी हैं, so you guys can pass these around. The reason for books is because I think we spend so much time thinking कि यार e-book ले ली, PDF ले लिया, white paper पढ़ लिया, right? लेकिन किताब की एक अपनी खूबसूरती जो होती है of like holding it, paper कौन सा है, cover किस चीज़ का बना हुआ है, you know, उस पे क्या embossing हुई हुई है, महंगी किताब मतलब कि अब तो आप reading से जाके ले ही नहीं सकते because 15,000 रुपए की किताब हुई हुई है, right? So if you're, and there's also a book on typography and also things like, these are things that typically not everybody from a design background comes from. Is anyone here a product, like a physical product, industrial designer? Okay, so basically क्या होता है कि आपने कुछ ना कुछ physical चीज़ों की आपको exposure होती है. You know कि इसका color क्या होगा, material क्या होगा, density क्या होगी. So as an example, this is a book called CMF, Color, Material and Finish. This is very standard in industrial design. For example, आपने जब metal बनाना होता है तो इसकी क्या gauge क्या होगी, thickness क्या होगी, paint type कौन सा apply करना है उस ऊपर. These are important because look, we in the electrical engineering, CS, and then 2D screen world, we forget about all these things. Like you can't exist outside of it. आप बेशक work from home है, आपका जो Donald's के AC की जो plastic है, if it's too cheap or if it's just the remote is horrible to use, you won't buy it again. You won't recommend it. So all of these things, the reason I'm saying this to this community is because you guys think about design day and night. But it's also cool and fun to think about it outside of that spectrum, specifically because हमारे ऊपर ये जिम्मेदारी बनती है, because so many people who experience bad design don't have the power to change it. What I mean by bad design is सड़कों में, this is a political statement, but बगैर सोचे समझे U-turn घुसा दिया आपने, right? Or a U-turn की वजह से और accidents हो रहे हैं. So that's poor design, that's poor usability, right? That's not really thought through. So there's no real methodology, there's no science to it. So I'll quickly jump into, I want to walk through how I use Figma for some wayfinding and signage design, which is not a typical application for this. So that's the URL. And today we'll start with DK. एक दो और चीजें हैं जो, so I also did a lot of the, एक hotel है और restaurant I called Fred. And there's also a place called the Fred and the Observatory. So I did a lot of work over there. तो उनकी काफी मैंने branding वगैरह की हुई थी. And then we'll talk about some work I did at Collabs. उनकी भी एक मैंने project किया था. So all of this is very physical in nature. अच्छा, actually let me grab this real quick. This here. So if you have been to Daftar Khan before, you've seen कि यार directions वगैरह किस तरह होती हैं, right? So ये एक project है जिन पे मैंने काम किया था, and they asked me to, hello, battery dead. Sure. नहीं, I think flash कर रहा है, तो शायद इसकी dead होने वाली है. Better. Yeah. So off. अच्छा, आवाज आ रही है? बेहतर. Okay. So एक pillar था, जिसके ऊपर आपकी सारी wayfinding description है. So you have this constrained frame, imagine in Figma, right? That you have to play with, and it has to be a realistic frame that gets the information across. And what kind of questions do you think you would ask yourself if someone said, "यार आपने एक wayfinding का pillar redesign करना है"? Any suggestions? Any ideas? What would the first question of research be if someone said, "यार ये pillar redesign करना है"? There's no wrong answer, so I need answers though. So what's the first thing that comes to mind? What would you do? Any? Size, exactly. And actually, then that's a really good question. What drives the size? Should it be a billboard? Should it be this small? Should it be this size? So what drives the size? What do you think drives the size in wayfinding? Well, the number of directions, very good. And the number one thing, कि आपने कितने दूर से उसको देखना है. Like आप billboard जब बनाएंगे, so if I make a billboard, मैंने Liberty के ऊपर लगाना है, it just says, you suck or whatever. It says something. It says love you. अगर आप उसका font size गलत रखेंगे, तो obviously it will be an undersell. आप मतलब कि 60-20 का एक billboard लगा के, you really waste it. So typography and estimating कि किस distance से देखना है. So for example, जब दफ्तर खान के ऊपर sign भी लग रहा था, so these guys asked me कि what should the size be. So architecture में these are standards that are already built in. लेकिन मजे की बात ये है कि हमने जब उसको करवाया भी, so I basically said कि the real world test would be to see how wide it is. And where do you see it from? Because the truth is, हम जितना भी बड़ा इसको बना दें, आप जब कौसा की तरफ से आ रहे होते हैं, आपकी नजर कभी भी इस तरह नहीं होती. You're going to be looking on the ground, right? So these are usability and accessibility things you want to engineer into your design. It's not so you could say कि इसके बगैर मौत तो नहीं आ रही, लेकिन ब्रांड की एक तरीके से मौत आएगी because उसको नजर नहीं आया, right? Especially रात को. So these are just interesting things for me to really consider because it looks like it's something to do with architecture, but it's not. Architecture and all of this stuff is just design is design. I feel like, we should all aim to be designers. Because कहते हैं ना कि आप किस किस्म के designer हैं. So yes, you may be at a certain point in your life. You may be a visual designer, you may be a design engineer, you may be something else. लेकिन design किसी की कोई मलकियत नहीं है उस पे, right? The best designers we all appreciate didn't go to school for it. ठीक है? So just to show you कि ये form factor था, तो ये एक design challenge आया कि इसको ठीक करें, इसको बेहतर करें, यार बड़ी so this is in Vogue. So obviously you can see how many different places you navigate to. Now as a designer, I didn't have the flexibility to say कि यार इसमें से 5 चीजें निकाल दें. They all made sense. So first you have to estimate. एक तो size वाली बात थी. Then you estimate what is the right information. What can I remove?
बाथरूम तो लाजमी आपको चाहिए होगा. Co-working hall, for example, अगर सामने नजर आ रहा है कि co-working hall है, so actually it's a great question. Co-working hall ये है, लेकिन अब ये arrow जो है, is the co-working hall this way or is it this way? I can't say. I'm actually confused by it. Right? These are things you are only because I was asked and paid to do this, so I have time to look at it. वरना तो किसी को you don't really bring it up. So these are just things I want you to be aware of, and these set the premise. So this again is not Figma level stuff, but this is way beyond. You should be thinking beyond Figma, right? Beyond the screen, beyond the laptop. And just to call it the reason, मैं कल ही अपने cousin से की बात कर रहा था, and I said, yeah, he's a very prolific like AI engineer in the States. So मैंने कहा यार actually I think a lot of my life right now is centered around कि कल को ये laptop dead हो गया, ये light चली जाएगा. सोचो आप ऑफिस में बैठे हैं, लाइट चली आती है तो ठीक है, यूपीएस चल गया, जनरेटर चल गया. जब वो दिन भी होते हैं अगर जनरेटर की चीज़ें बस खत्म हो जाती है, right? What are you doing, man? You have nothing to show for your work. We are purely digital people, right? I'm not saying that's not belittling it, but it's cool to have something that is physical to just exist outside of your office, so you can say कि I have a claim to say कि ये मैंने बनाया था, you know. So back to this. So इसका form factor मैंने कहा कि rather than कि हम एक as an experiment, I told Saad कि let's do it on the same form factor. I'm not averse to the form factor because this is a pillar is a very good way of telling people where to go. What I did was I'm bringing in IBM. Sorry, how much time do I have? Oh, okay, ठीक है. So everyone knows what this is? Is everyone familiar with this? You should even put it together. It's very cheesy. Yeah, it's IBM, right? So, and I didn't know this until today. मैं ये देखता रहा था कि ये I और B तो I guess. But IBM's design system over the last 10-15 years has been amazing. I think a lot of people will understand this, and you might even see the fact that what font is this? Nobody knows this font. Are you guys real Figma users? Huh? Is it what? Inter is close. Monster भी नहीं है. No. Keep trying. The name is on the screen. It's from the same company. And if you don't know this font, then you guys should definitely know.